Good evening. My name is Evan Gregory, and this is Bible Answers. We're going to be looking at John chapter 21 tonight. I'll have all of our verses on the screen so you can follow along. And as always, this is brought to you by the North Columbus Church of Christ located in Columbus, Mississippi. Our website is northcolumbuschristians.com. There you can find out more about us. You can see past sermons. But we also have our YouTube page. It's North Columbus Church of Christ. There you can find all of our videos that we've done on Facebook. We upload all those videos there. So we have there's a pile of videos there that you can look at. We've been making our way through John, so if you miss any of those videos, you can go back and really work your way through the Book of John. And so we're going to be finishing up tonight, Lord willing. We the last time we looked at John chapter 20, and we saw Jesus crucified, and we seen him resurrected. Okay, so really the most important event in human history, we see it occurring. Christ is resurrected, and really that's really why we're still talking about Jesus is the resurrection. Yes, the crucifixion, and he had to be crucified. He had to die. But when we see Jesus being resurrected, not only was he the atoning sacrifice for sin, but we see now that he's resurrected. He has power over death. We see him being that he ascends to the right hand of God, and so we see all of those benefits after death. And even and for Christians today, the most important thing that we can have is the forgiveness of sins. But we also have other benefits that we can have to Jesus interceding for us on the right hand of God. And so we see all of that happen. And we see again in John chapter 20, Jesus being resurrected. He was dead. He was dead 3 days, and then he rose again. And so we see where he had shown himself to multiple people. It's clear that it was Jesus, and so that takes us into John chapter 21. And it says, after these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and in this way he showed himself. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, the two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we are going with you also. They went out and immediately got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. But when the morning had now come, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Then Jesus said to them, children, have you any food? They answered him, no. And so we see yet another time that Jesus shows himself to the disciples, and this time they're at the Sea of Tiberias, and they're fishing. And I don't exactly know as far as the timeline as how far how often or how much time had passed since chapter 20, but it seems almost like they're continuing on with their lives here, that they're going out going fishing. And so they're out fishing, they don't catch anything, but yet we see that Jesus, that says, when the morning now come, Jesus stood on the shore, but they didn't know it was Jesus. And they're asking, and he's asking them, do they have any food? Okay. So Jesus has showed himself to them before. We saw that in chapter 20. We see the situation with Thomas, and so we see again that he's showing himself yet again to them at this point. Uh, so we go to verses 6 through 10. So it says, and he said to them, cast a net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. Therefore, that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. Now, when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and plunged into the sea. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from land, but about 200 cubits, dragging the net with fish. Then, as soon as they had come to land, they saw a fire of coals there and fish laid on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish which you have just caught." So they figured out it was Jesus. Okay, and so I would think that they kind of were putting two and two together when Jesus tells them that hey, they weren't catching anything, but then he tells them to cast it on the right side, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. So we see yet another miracle here, that they go from no fish and not even being able to be bringing in these fish. Quite a quite a coincidence to say the least. And so, but so obviously we know that this is a miracle, that Jesus is allowing them to catch all of this fish. And so I think that that miracle, and then perhaps maybe they could clear up, they clear it up to where they could see him better, or whatever it may be. And then we see where the disciple whom Jesus loved, that being John, saying that it is the Lord. Okay, and so we have Peter. Remember Peter, that he had denied Jesus. Okay, 3 times, not too far in the past. Now we see him. It says when he heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment and plunged into the sea. Okay, so he had jumped into the sea to go to Jesus. And then we see these other people, the other disciples, that they came in this little boat that was with them. So we see Peter rushing to go see Jesus, jumping off the boat to go see him. And so obviously they're happy. They're happy to see him again. He's died. He was resurrected. He's shown himself to him before. He's showing himself to him again. A little bit different circumstances here, and we have this continuing story around these fish here, that they were bringing these fish to shore, and then we see this situation where we have this fire and this fish and bread on the fire, and so Jesus asks them to bring some of that fish in which they have just caught. So it takes us to verses 11 through 14. It says, Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to land, full of large fish, 153. And although there were so many, the net was not broken. Jesus said to them, Come and eat breakfast. Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, Who are you? Knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. This is now the third time Jesus showed himself to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. John gives us the number of fish, 153. Apparently, that was a lot for that size of net, and it was remarkable that it had not even broken. Okay, and so not just a good catch, but it was a huge catch, and a huge catch, so much that apparently the net should have been broken. And so we have Jesus here asking them to come and eat breakfast. So it's an interesting situation here, that it's like Jesus is just acting, in my mind, is acting like he's just, this is just another day. Let's it's time for breakfast, okay? And we have this situation where they got all this fish, okay, this miracle, right? And then we see, as John puts, he says, none of the disciples dared ask him, Who are you? Know that it was the Lord. So it was obvious that it was him. And so we see again John saying this is now the third time that he has showed himself to his disciples after he's raised from the dead. Okay, so he's showing himself to them multiple times. So this was not just once. And you think about that as far as proof. Nobody can say, "Oh well, you all of you." Maybe you had a collective hallucination that one time, or whatever, whatever somebody may come up with. But he's showing himself multiple times, beyond doubt, that this is not someone that just maybe they're look like Jesus, Maybe they act like Jesus, but they're not. Okay, this is very clear that Jesus is showing up multiple times, showing him to the disciples, making it clear that he's there and he's alive. He's again, Thomas. He showed his wounds to Thomas. They see him. They touched him. They felt him. We see here Jesus that he's again they're coming together. He's telling them to come and eat breakfast. So this he's a man. But yet he's alive. He was dead, and yet he's alive here, and make it just painfully obvious for the disciples here. So then we get to verses 15 through 19. It says, "So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, 'Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?' He said to him, 'Yes, Lord, you know that I love you.' He said to him, 'Feed my lambs.' He said to him again a second time, 'Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?' He said to him, 'Yes, Lord, you know that I love you.' He said to him, 'Tend my sheep.' He said to him the third time, 'Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?' Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, 'Do you love me?' And he said to him, 'Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you.' Jesus said to him, 'Feed my sheep. Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish.' This he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, 'Follow me.'" So we see this conversation between Jesus and Peter, and he's asking him. Basically, Jesus asked him three times, "Does he love him?" The first time he asks him, Peter responds, "Yes." He says, "Feed my lambs." He asks Simon again. Simon says, or Simon, Peter, whatever. Peter says, "Yes." He says, "Tend my sheep." Okay. And then the third time he asks the same question, he responds, "Yeah." And then Jesus again says, "Feed my sheep." So he says, "Feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep." Okay. So basically, feed my followers, tend to my followers, you take care of them. Okay. Is what he's saying. But notice this conversation that he's asking the same question three times. Okay. And in our language, we don't quite get the full meaning here in regards to this word love. Uh, the first two times that Jesus asked Peter if he loves him, Jesus is using really the form of agape love, and there's different forms of love. The word love in the Greek language. Okay, and basically this agape love is going to be this highest level of love. This is not a romantic type love, but it is the highest level of love that we can, basically that we can have. And so Jesus is asking him this. Okay, he says basically, "Do you agape me?" And Peter does not use that same term for love. He does not use that agape term, but rather the phileo. Okay, you may be familiar with Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, city of brotherly love, and so there's this different level of love that is more in line of again brotherly love or affection. Okay, so this is a different term that Peter uses here. And so in our language, we miss a little bit of what's being said here. So Jesus is using a different form of love, a higher level of love, basically, than how Peter responds. Okay. And so, you know, we, Peter may be saying, "Yeah, I love you," or whatever, but he's not using that. Again, he's not using that same term that Jesus is using. Okay, and I really don't know why. Maybe he's not. eh, y- Maybe he's not yet committed. to that. Maybe there's some hesitation on Peter's part. We really don't know. But the third time, uh, Jesus, when he says the word love, he does not use that agape term. He uses the phileo term. So this would be the same. So Jesus lowers his language down to what Peter was saying. Okay. And at this point, we see Peter was grieved. And it may have been, it says, because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And it may just be that it's just, how many times you gonna ask me this question? But it is interesting when you do look at that Greek language and you see those terms being used, that Jesus uses one level of love for the first two questions, and then he lowers it down to the term that Peter was using the third time. And and maybe this was a way of questioning Peter as to how devoted he was. But we see, regardless, we do see the effect that this has on Peter. And he's grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And then he says, Lord, you know all things, you know that I love you. Okay. So again, he responds again. He says, yes. And then he says, you know. And what's also interesting is the second time he responds, he says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And the third time he says, you know that I love you. There is a different Greek meaning for this word for know as well. Okay. And so he is, we see the same words being used, but when we look at that Greek language, that there's a slightly different Greek words being used that have a slightly different meaning. And so we see how uh, this changing of what the terms that they're using for love could affect how it could affect Peter. We do see him grieve, but also we see that he's using these different forms of the word know, try to amp up, try to showing Jesus here. And he says, you know all things, you know that I love you. But each time Peter responds again, Jesus is using some form of this idea of taking care of his sheep, feeding his sheep, tending his sheep, feeding his lambs. And he's saying, his lamb, that would be his followers. Okay. He's saying, you feed them, you take care of them. Jesus goes on, he says, most assuredly I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wish, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hand, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish. This he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. So Jesus is telling Peter, somebody is going to take you, they're going to bind you, they're going to gird you, and they're going to take you where you don't want to go. That they're going to basically take you prisoner, and you're going to die is basically what he's saying. And we see where ultimately Peter did. It's not recorded in the New Testament, but we do see in history that Peter was indeed, he was martyred. He was killed. And so we see where Jesus is telling him, this is what's going to happen to you. And and even after that, when he tells them this is what's going to happen, he says, follow me. Even after all that, he still tells him to follow him. And so Peter denied Jesus, not denied himself, denied Jesus three times. We see Peter being asked this question three times of does he love Jesus? And so it's really interesting when you look at those comparisons that he has denied him three times. Jesus has him three times. If he loves him, he responds yes, all three times. And then Jesus is telling him, this is what's going to happen to you. And ultimately, the reason that this is going to happen to him is because he's following Christ, following Jesus. So that takes us to verses 20 through 25. It says, then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following, who also had leaned on his breast at the supper and said, Lord, who is this one who betrays you? Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, but Lord, what about this man? Jesus said to him, if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Then this saying went out among the brethren that this disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die. But if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? This is the disciple who testifies of these things and wrote these things. And we know that his testimony is true, and that there are also many other things that Jesus did, which if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Amen. So Jesus tells him something bad's going to happen to you. But then again, he still encourages him to follow him. But Peter says that he looks at, so it says that he looks at the disciple or saw the disciple whom Jesus loved. Again, this is John. Okay. He says, and Peter asks, but Lord, what about this man? And Jesus responds, if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? And really, this is, when you think about this response, it really is appropriate for Peter, because Peter questioned, well, what about him? What's going to happen to him? But that's not something that he should be worried about. And I think that's what Jesus is saying. This is, this is, don't worry about it. This is not for you to decide. If I wanted to live for a long time, if I wanted to live forever, I could do that. What is that to you? Uh, but he says, if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? Then this saying went out among the brethren that this disciple would not die. But again, Jesus didn't say that. John makes that clear. Okay. So people are thinking that John, hey, he's not going to die. Nothing bad is going to happen. He's not going to be martyred, like Peter would be. And so that saying went out from them. And of course, John is trying to, it's really interesting how he writes this, that he's making it clear he didn't say I was going to live, or not, rather not die, but he says, if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? So John is laying this straight, saying this is exactly what he said. And so clearing up any confusion and what, or any saying that may arose from that, and making clear about what Jesus actually did say. So John, he says, this is the disciple who testifies of these things and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. So he's saying, this is John. I'm writing these things. I've seen these things. I testify of these things. This testimony is true. But also he says there's many other things that Jesus did that's not written about. And he's saying that if we wrote about all of them, the world itself could not contain the book. So there's a lot that he did that is not written down. Okay. But we also have to recognize that that's not, because we don't have all of those things, that's not a hindrance to us. These things were written so that we believe, so that we may believe, and those and what we do have written is enough for someone to believe. But John is saying here that there are other things that he did, and again, those, even though that they're not written down, it's not something that we uh, have to have. Okay, what we have already given to us is enough. And so that finishes up the book of John. It took us a while to get through there, but we finally made it. And I don't know what we're going to do after this. Maybe we'll start another book. But again, if you are just seeing this and you want to go through the entire book of John, we have these videos up on YouTube. Again, our page is North Columbus Church of Christ, and you can find all of these videos there. And where we go through the entire book of John, we have other stuff from before. So again, we got a lot of material on YouTube. But as always, I hope that this has been useful for y'all, and I hope that you all have a good day and a good rest of the week. Thanks.